Alrighty then, we are going to dive in here and try to do some example problems that are right from your notes. You should have your notes in front of you. You should be either copying what I've got here or have this actual document in front of you. We're going over some similarity concepts. We're gonna deal with some similar triangles in this problem, so let's dive right in. Problem number 1. 2 triangles below are similar. Okay, fair enough. Highlight corresponding sides and mark congruent angles. All right, fair enough. So we need to use some clues here to figure this out. I put a few really subtle clues in there, and I threw some curveballs in there just to kind of mess with you to see if you can pay attention to it. So the first thing that you should look at are just any obvious stuff like angles that are marked. I see the 37 degrees in both of them, so that's going to tell me that point B is going to be connected to this other point that's not labeled over here, right? So there should be some sort of labeling that happens over here in this spot. I'm going to put a box around it. I know that needs to be labeled as something, and that's going to connect to something. What is labeled is this other point over here, D, and then D prime, right? That means that this other shape was dilated. Dilations happen, they're a form of transformation. We did cover that before, but transformation, there's 4 of them. One of them is dilations, and this one it expands, right? There's a center and it expands away from it like a balloon, right? So all the points go equidistant away from that point. And so that's what happened with this one, and I can tell that just because there's the D and then the D prime. So between those 2 spots where I was gonna label that B and then the D in my smaller triangle, we've got the D prime, and I'm gonna label this one as B prime just as a placeholder because that one came from the original B. And now I know, I'm gonna use my highlighter here, and I recommend doing this with colored pencils. I know that this side here on the big triangle must match up, correspond to that side there, okay? I know that those 2 correspond just from those clues. The other clue that I have then is by process of elimination, that third point must be A prime up here because this was A, and so that we have that other one, all right? So let's use our process of elimination here. We can use a different color, and I can highlight a side. Let's highlight this side that says 2 feet here. So from D to A on the small triangle must be D prime to A prime on the big triangle. That's how I know to match those up, all right? There are many ways to do that. You're not always given these exact clues. You could be given different clues. So you really wanna pay attention to matching up the corresponding sides correctly. All right, and then I'm gonna use this other green color to highlight that third side. Now you might notice that there are some labels on there. There's a 2 feet, there's an X, there's a Y. I just kind of threw those in. Those are not necessarily helpful clues. There's not even an X or a number over there on the small triangle. There's nothing about the X and Y that helps us solve this problem. Okay, so you don't want to dive right into finding X and Y or anything. The problem doesn't actually ask for that. Okay, and this problem is kind of a tricky one. I had to use some specific clues. I will give you different clues. You will see different clues in the future. All right, you'll see that in another example. So what else does it tell us to do? It says mark congruent angles. Okay, so there's a few ways that I've seen angles marked. There's one that's already marked, 37 degrees, and that's at the intersection of the red side and the green side. Okay, so we can see that that matches up there. So what about where A prime is? So at the green side and the blue side, let's put another arc there. I'm gonna use a double arc since the single arc was already used for the B prime corner, the vertex. And that means I'm gonna put a double arc down here. Double rainbow. What does it mean? It means that those 2 angles are congruent, right? All the angles will be congruent. The sides are proportional, but the angles are going to be congruent. And we have this last one here. And so I'm going to put a triple rainbow, triple arc there to show that these angles over here with the triple angle marks, those are congruent angles. If I knew one measure of that angle and this other one triangle, I would know the other triangle. So they not only match up, but they are congruent, okay? So congruent angles, and then the sides are gonna be proportional, all right? So in the next video, I'm gonna go through how to do another example. Oh, you know what, I almost forgot. Before I get ahead of myself, let's write the similarity statement. Now that we have all this, let's write a similarity statement. That's pretty important. How could I forget? Similarity statement, all right. It's big news, because sometimes you start with this. So what I'm going to start with is a little triangle. So we're going to say two triangles are similar. So the triangle, and I just need to pick one to name it. Okay, so I'm going to start with the little guy. And I'm going to pick those three letters, A, D, and B, totally at random. It doesn't have to be in alphabetical order, totally at random for now. Okay, so let's start with, let's go get crazy and go B, and then D, and then A. Okay, so I just use the three vertices of the triangle, and then I put this little squiggly line to show similarity. Now, because I chose B, D, and A, I have to be real careful when I go with the other one. So it's gonna be triangle. I cannot choose at random now. So since I chose B first, I'm going to choose B prime, then D prime, and A prime. Those two triangles are similar. In the future, you'll see that I won't be using the same letters with primes. I'll be using different letters, so you'll have to be very careful on the order in which you choose those for a similarity statement. More on that in the next video.